Why was the West Side Trail Complex developed? The west side of Eagle Creek Park is an area of natural beauty with a rich diversity of plant and animal life. It encompasses over 1,000 acres of exceptional natural habitat, especially mature, high-quality forest. Bird life is abundant, and many species of plants and animals, some rare, are to be found. The dilemma with such a valuable and unique natural area of parkland is how best to make it accessible to as many people as possible while preventing overuse and abuse that will inevitably destroy the very features that make the area so attractive. How can this wonderful natural area be protected while allowing unimpeded public access?
Hello and welcome to Eagle Creek Park Nature Notes, the audio series created to help you plan your next visit to Eagle Creek Park in Indianapolis, Indiana. I'm Adam Hibshman, the Marketing and Program Coordinator for Eagle Creek Park Foundation. We're the primary nonprofit partner of Eagle Creek Park. I'm fairly new to this role, but I've been coming to Eagle Creek Park for more than 10 years since I moved to Indianapolis, and I've found ways to connect with the outdoors throughout my entire life. Today, we have several guests to talk about how the West Side Trail Project went from being an idea in a park strategic plan in 1997 to the beautiful trunk trail you can hike today on the west side of beautiful Eagle Creek Park. Let's introduce our guests today.
Hi, I'm John Pankhurst, Director Emeritus of the Eagle Creek Park Foundation. I first joined the advisory committee and the board foundation in 1994. I've been acting as coordinator and chief sheepdog for this project ever since its inception over 10 years ago.
Alex Upchurch, past president. I began volunteering with the Park Foundation in 2009 and was the president from 2014 to 18 during the initial proposal, fundraising, and beginning construction.
Hi, I'm Bumb Lauer, a Director Emeritus of the Eagle Creek Park Foundation. As a neighbor of the park, I've been involved with the Foundation Board and its advisory committee for over 15 years. I served as the Foundation Board President during the major construction period, and I continue to be part of the Trail Construction and Oversight Committee.
Hi, I'm Brenda Howard. I'm Senior Ecologist with the City of Indianapolis. Having first worked with the Department of Parks and Recreation, and then we got moved over to Public Works, and I've been involved with natural area restoration at Eagle Creek Park since 2004.
Brittany Swinford. I'm Regional Manager for Eagle Creek Park and have been in that role for the past 10 years. I've worked on this project the past 11 years. I'm delighted to see the progression of this landmark project that will provide unusual, unique access to all of our Indianapolis residents.
Hi, I'm Meghan Mustin. I'm the Executive Director for the Eagle Creek Park Foundation and have been since September of 2022.
Well, we've got quite a cast here, and we're so grateful that you all can be here today to talk a little bit about this trail you've worked so hard on. Eagle Creek Park was officially established as a park in 1972. And from that time until the opening of the West Side Trail, virtually all park development happened on the east side of the park. Can you tell me what was happening on the west side of the park before it was developed by this project? Who, if anyone, was using the west side of the park? How was it being used?
The west side of the park is really comprised of two distinct areas, the Eagle and Fishback Creek valleys, which were cut by melting glaciers, the last ice age, and are heavily wooded with spectacular ravines. The higher, flatter land that was and is occupied by the 27-hole golf course, the crest and hideaway retreats and soccer fields, an old archery field used for the Pan Am Games. The old farmland has been undergoing a program of reforestation for a number of years. Much of the heavily contoured land is within the State Nature Preserve, and there were and are still many rogue pedestrian trails throughout the wooded area.
Restoration of the wetland at Scott Starling Nature Sanctuary was one of Land Stewardship's first project areas and started nearly 3 decades ago. and Land Stewardship has done restoration work on the west side of the park for decades because of the Eagles Crest Nature Preserve.
We first began trail projects on the west side with renovation of a hiking trail inside Eagles Crest State Nature Preserve back in 2013. We partnered with IDNR, Department of Natural Resources, and the Hoosier Hikers Council to restore a beautiful 1.5-mile loop trail through the preserve. The trail turned out so good and opened up a lot of additional opportunities. The trail followed the contours of the topography, was well drained, and created pathways to beautiful overlooking Fishback Creek and the reservoir. Hoosier Hikers Council is a wonderful volunteer organization comprised of the most talented and dedicated trail enthusiasts, and they do all the work for free. Needless to say, they have a long wait list of projects.
So, John, it's safe to say there was a lot going on the west side of the park, despite there being no official trails or park presence on the west side. I understand you've been talking about developing something on the west side since the late 1980s and into the early 1990s. What did you have in mind for the West Side Trail all those years ago?
Well, the importance of preserving the unique natural environments of the west side was confirmed in the mid-80s when the Crest State Nature Preserve was created. The 1997 Park Master Plan called for the area to be vehicle-free with a trail system that protected the sensitive natural environment and a method of collecting entrance fees.
It was always a focus of the foundation to preserve the natural areas of the west side, and for many of us, we thought that should mean just keeping the west side left alone. As I moved from board member to president, it was made clear, thanks to John and others, that we needed a plan to open the space to the public in a way that best fit the master plan.
Thanks, Alex. And I know you were the Eagle Creek Park Foundation board president in 2014 when the West Side Trail project started to move forward. What was the beginning of this process like? Who was involved and what were some of our early goals?
We had a steering committee in place that had been meeting regularly for about a year before formally introducing our plan to the board. At first, there was acceptance of the concept and the trail and its importance, but not in our ability to fundraise and build this trail, with a board that hadn't done anything like this before. And keep in mind, our initial proposal to the Eagle Creek Park Foundation included a $300,000 budget.
It became very clear in late 2013 that definitive plans for the west side of the park were urgently needed to be developed and implemented if this exceptional area was to be protected from abuse and overuse while still being made available to everybody.
We created a trail steering committee composed of staff, experts, and a diverse panel of stakeholders. We had representatives from the Eagle Creek Park Foundation, Citizens Advisory Council Committee, DNR Nature Preserves, Land Stewardship Ecologist, Amos Butler Audubon, Nature Center and Sanctuary Group, birders, trail runners, and a really persistent guy named John Pankhurst.
And so I understand you would have been a fairly new park manager in 2014. What's your recollection of the beginning of the West Side Trail project? Was Indy Parks on board right away? Did it take some convincing? How did you help the project along?
One initial challenge was justifying a budget for the project. As I said earlier, we worked with the Hoosier Hikers Council on the Nature Preserve Loop Trail, and the cost was free. It was difficult to explain to people that this new West Side Trail project would cost over $800,000 and ended up being $2.6 million. We felt very strongly about getting this project accomplished and creating controlled access to this amazing site, so we pushed forward. John and I set up our little dog and pony show and presented to all the local organizations around town that we thought would be interested in supporting the project. We weren't able to secure much funding this way, but we did drum up a lot of support and excitement.
So for anyone, I understand Alex Stewart played an outsized role in the early investigation of the feasibility and design of the trail itself. What was it like to work with someone designing a trail from scratch? What were some of the challenges and triumphs of that work?
Dick Aikman and I reached out to Alex Stewart because we were aware of the excellent work he'd done for Indy Parks and also his reputation as a great builder of trails nationally. Alex's extensive experience proved to be invaluable in the planning of this project.
Yes, Alex Stewart is an impressive trail builder. I'm familiar with his work in some of the other Indy parks. And initially, he mapped all the existing trails and inventoried those and made suggestions for rerouting or closure of trails in the future, in addition to the requested new trail layout for us. He worked with us on tweaks we wanted, like having the trail go over the historic bridge. And Alex was also very cognizant of sensitive habitat areas and avoiding or minimizing impacts to those locations.
I can say from a little bit of experience, it is a beautiful trail. Alex, John, and Brittany, can you lay out how the early parts of something like a $2.6 million grant all work? How did the design grant proposal come together? How did you prioritize what elements you wanted to be in the proposal, and what got left out?
If I could just interject, the 2.6 million grant was what the Lilly Endowment eventually granted. The whole project cost 2.9 million, but 300,000 of that was provided by the Eagle Creek Park Foundation and the Nature Sanctuary Group.
At the time, we had no one on the board with previous experience working on big projects with the city or Indy Parks. But we did have talented people. And Sam Chambers, Luann Baker, and Emily Storm Smith were integral to successfully completing the Lilly grant.
Yeah, the final figure, as I just mentioned, was 2.9 million. Initial estimates were very much lower, in the region of 350,000. But the decision to locate the trail outside the State Nature Preserve and not on the golf course land presented some serious physical constraints. In addition, the scope of the project was enlarged to include the Starling Nature Sanctuary and repair of the old roadway from the crest down the hill to the sanctuary to Wilson Road, and the installation of automatic gates at the Bear, the Crest, and Starling Car Park. The overriding priority was to build a trail that would be durable, allow users to enjoy the extraordinary topography and natural environment while protecting the ecosystem. We would have liked to incorporate more loop trails, but recognized that the project was already becoming very expensive. We knew that Indy Parks, with their limited funds, would not be able to finance the project, and that funds would have to be raised from private donors through the Eagle Creek Park Foundation.
So when we were talking about the design of the trail, the overall value was to keep the trail outside of the nature preserve and outside of the golf course for obvious reasons. And because of this, the price just continued to inflate.
Can you tell me how the 3 different ADA trails were made part of the West Side Trail? Were these a priority from the beginning? And if not, what made them a priority? Now that these ADA trails are in place, what do you think about how they fit into the overall project?
The need for ADA trails was always a consideration, since we were very aware of the lack of them in Eagle Creek Park. They fit in very well, are well used, and not just by handicapped people.
A big focus of the project was to activate these park sites that were traditionally the Wild West. There's not a lot of action going on the west side of the park. So we began with a smaller project at Starling Nature Sanctuary with multiple volunteer work days with great group partners like Indiana Wildlife Federation, Cummins, and REI. Working with Don and Brenda in land stewardship, we were able to get a cost estimate on making the existing Starling hiking trail an ADA accessible trail, and also installing a boardwalk trail through the Fen wetland, which is traditionally saturated. Once Starling was completed, we were confident that we could easily do 2 other ADA trails, the North Loop and the South Loop. The ADA trails have been a vital part of the whole West Side Trail complex and a great addition to the park.
I definitely agree, Brittany, and thank you for clarifying. So 2 of the ADA trails on the west side were part of this project that we're talking about, and 1 existed just beforehand. Is that correct?
Correct.
And by the way, listeners, if you want to hear a full episode about the ADA handicap accessible trails on the west side, you can listen to my conversation with current board president Emily Storm Smith. At the beginning of the project, I understand funding seemed like it was going to be a challenge. What steps were taken to secure funding in the early years? And how did you arrive at the $2.9 million figure for the project? Was there one crucial moment in terms of securing funding or convincing others that it would be ultimately possible to win the grant funding?
I have to admit, I was nervous for all those board meetings from 2014 through 2016, when each and every time we'd provide a progress report and that budget would maybe double. And so that was nerve-wracking. But by 2016, we knew we had a solid trail design. We knew the value it would create for Indianapolis and its citizens and the 1.5 million visitors.
It took almost 3 years of intensive planning for the steering committee to arrive at a definitive plan and definitive budget in early 2017. However, we'd been in discussions with the Indianapolis Park Foundation, CICF, Central Indiana Community Foundation, and other funders during 2016. It was a steady process, really, of turning over stones in the hope of finding a pot of gold under one of them.
My understanding is it took from late 2014 to late 2018 to go from, yes, we're going to do this, to hearing back from Lilly that they accepted the grant proposal. Did you have doubts over those years? If so, what kept you up nights as the project went from an idea to a grant proposal for $2.6 million?
I personally never doubted we would eventually get the project completed. It was simply the right thing to do. However, major projects rarely go as initially planned, and this one certainly was no exception. We made slow but steady progress developing the plan, resolving many major issues. There was a period during 2018 when, having completed the detailed plan, when it was discouraging to meet with potential funders, only to have them express great enthusiasm and moral support, but not offer any funding. One thing we did not anticipate was the degree of vandalism that was occurring, which required the installation of surveillance equipment.
It was exciting to think of all the possibilities. At one point, John and I talked about adding an ADA-accessible birding tower near the Bear Overlook, and even ventured out to look at others around the area. That idea, of course, got struck when the budget constraint reality hit us. But who knows, maybe in the next phase of the projects. In these discussions of what else could we do without budget constraints, we were led to the concept of a West Side Trail complex, not just the trail.
Many may know there is a large nature preserve on the west side. What were some of the ecological considerations and challenges from the beginning of the project? Can you tell us about the special flora and fauna on the west side? Can you talk about the park boundary with the golf course and with Eagles Crest Nature Preserve? How did this impact the direction of the trail overall?
Well, the articles of dedication for the state-designated nature preserve say we can't have organized events in the nature preserve, yet we were doing things like large group trail runs through there. So this violated the agreement and presented a threat to some of the highest quality habitat within our park system due to the many participants in those events. Many of the park's plants and birds that are endangered, rare, threatened, or species of concern are on the west side of the park, so any work is done with those species in mind. So one of the first things we did prior to starting trail work was to pay for a professional survey of Eagles Crest Nature Preserve boundary, and then placed many markers along that boundary. This survey was necessary as the area between the nature preserve and the golf course is very limited in some places with challenging topography. In essence, some big ravines with steep slopes.
In my opinion, this is the best part of the park. As Brenda has said, its rolling topography and rich understory are just fantastic. It's the more quiet part of the park, and we hope to keep it that way. That's why we've had to spend so much money and time on creating the automatic gate systems. We want to activate the spaces and make them safe and inviting for our park visitors, but also have a layer of control to protect this unique, ecologically significant area of the park. The auto gates will only allow access during regular park hours, dawn to dusk, and are outfitted with security cameras to help deter vandalism and theft.
Ultimately, the Eagle Creek Park Foundation was awarded a $2.6 million grant from the Lilly Endowment for Arts and Culture. What did it feel like to win the grant? Which elements of the West Side Trail do you think make it part of Indianapolis art and culture?
Adam, how did we feel? We were delighted and relieved. very relieved. The gateway arches at the three trailheads, carved by an Indian and a woodcarver, are excellent examples of the artwork. The layout of the trail, with its many bridges, contours, and scenic views, portray the scenery of Indianapolis at its very best.
Adding that additional $2.6 million to the $300,000 we raised gave us the ability to, create a 7-mile, almost 8-mile trail inside an Indianapolis park that offers everybody a place where you can spend the entire day hiking. Could take me even longer, with friends and family, or just a quiet lunch hour immersed in nature. It's invaluable.
We were a perfect fit for the Art and Culture grant because art is nature, nature is art. You can't have one without the other. It just works.
Well said. As the construction project began in 2019, what were some challenges the project faced?
The most obvious factor was the COVID pandemic and the need to isolate. This did not appear to, in hindsight, hinder the actual construction, but it did seriously slow the permitting process regarding the major bridge and stairway construction, and especially construction of the Starling car park and crest entrances. It also meant the committee had to learn how to meet remotely by Zoom.
Adverse weather restricted the completion of some of the major bridge structures. Severe cold and ice delayed the drilling of the foundation posts and even the placement of the stone steps. Availability of construction materials became an obstacle during the pandemic years as well.
The trail was already gaining so much interest that it was difficult to block off access during the construction process. We have some very dedicated trail users.
Can anyone think of a moment as the trail was being built that you thought something like, wow, this is really happening?
For me, it was seeing the 150-foot bridge crossing a ravine being built, which was especially amazing, as was the installation of the major iron staircase.
The moment for me was when we were awarded the Lilly grant. Obvious, I know, but it was official then, and we had a deadline to complete the project and spend the money.
For me, it was when my son, grandson, and I hiked one of the first completed sections north from the Hideaway Road to the historic bridge and beyond. Alex intentionally starts the trail work in the middle first and doesn't complete the trailheads until the end of the project. So we hiked this wonderful section, and the trail just felt right in where it was placed in the landscape, very organic. And it was rewarding to see it finally taking shape. And I remember thinking, this is going to be so awesome.
I know as we record, there are a few relatively small elements that need to be completed before some of us on this podcast would say that the trail is done. But people are hiking and running on the West Side Trail. How long did it take to build the main 5-mile trunk trail? How about the two ADA elements of the project? How long did it take to spend all the money from Lilly? And what money is being used today to sustain and complete the project?
The main hiking trail, the ADA trails, the viewing platform at the Bear, and the boardwalk in the Starling Sanctuary were all completed within 2 years before the end of 2021. The remainder of the $2.6 million grant from Lilly Endowment was spent during 2022 on gate and security equipment. The $300,000 from the Eagle Creek Foundation and Starling Nature Sanctuary Group is being used to pay for instructional and educational signage, native plant garden, security equipment, and removal of road trails. A dedicated maintenance fund has been established to ensure funding is available to keep the trail in good repair.
Before the trail was built, many people used rogue trails, as some of you have mentioned, trails established by individuals over time. What are some problems with these trails in terms of ecology and sustainability? Has having an established professional trail reduced the amount of rogue trail usage?
From an ecological standpoint, the fewer human trails through a natural area, the better. There is a zone of disturbance on either side of a path, so the further apart trails can be, the better. A well-planned trail system takes this into account. The plan was always to complete a trail from the crest to 56th Street, the Bear, that was entirely outside the Crest Nature Preserve, and then evaluate additional possible routes that would allow runners and hikers to walk loops. And any major addition to the trail system will unfortunately require a new capital campaign, since Indy Parks has insufficient funds.
The West Side Hiking Trail is designed to safely handle foot traffic. These trails are built to avoid natural dangers and to be sustainable. Sticking to the official paths ensure a low risk and an enjoyable experience for everyone, while venturing off trail leads to erosion, damaging the landscape, harming plant life. Using these road trails can trample delicate vegetation and disturb animal and bird habitats and disrupt natural processes. Many of the older informal trails traverse sensitive areas like the Starling Nature Sanctuary. The Eagle Creek Park Foundation's mission is not only to provide an enhanced outdoor activity space, but to protect and preserve the natural areas that we all love. We've been monitoring a very popular athletic tracking app used by hikers and trail runners. Their heat maps show us that the newly completed Trunk Trail is a highly used segment, but other old road trails are still in use. Our hope is to expand the trail system on the west side of Eagle Creek Park to include loops that allow runners to safely extend their runs without crossing nature preserves and potentially hazardous areas. Plans for one such loop is presently underway. Other frequently used rogue segments may be included in the future as funding permits.
The rogue trails are also a liability. We work really hard to maintain our 26 miles of hiking trails. We're regularly doing tree assessments and monitoring to make sure paths are clear of debris. Trail safety is our #1 priority.
Thanks, y'all. Talking about the rogue trails, I'll just say it for the listeners. Please use the marked trails. We've worked very hard to build them and maintain them. So this is a question for everybody, hopefully a little bit of fun here. What is your favorite thing to do on the West Side Trail? I've only taken a few hikes over there because I'm kind of new to this whole deal, but I'm just really impressed. As you mentioned, the design of the trail, the topography of the trail is something that you can access in a city of 1 million people. It's kind of unbelievable that that's the case. So just hiking over there for me so far.
I personally enjoy bird watching over there, and especially early in the year, the spring flowers are just beautiful.
Yeah, like John, I'm a big bird watcher, and specifically warbler watching over there. You can find a northern parula looking straight up in the tallest tree, if you can see it, or you can find a prothonotary warbler looking down at the water's edge.
I like to just relax, look at the wildflowers and other vegetation, and try not to notice the restoration work I need to be getting at.
For me, it's escaping. It's a quiet retreat away from the busier side of the park. I enjoy botanizing and monitoring the plants. I'm looking for species diversity, phenology, deer browse, and also making sure we're not getting plants poached. We do have ginseng and other desirable species over there. Here's my public service announcement. Collecting plants is not allowed on public park property, and especially not in a nature preserve. We do allow sustainable collection of mushrooms, nuts, and other fruiting bodies.
For me, it's my favorite place to take business meetings. One, it gets me out of the office, and I have found people just can't resist taking a meeting with me when I say, let's go for a hike. You've heard today all the people and organizations it took to build this trail for our community. So typically I'm meeting with somebody that I want to bring into our organization for one reason or another. So it's just such a great example of what they can do when they join the foundation, whether it's a potential board member or a fundraiser or somebody we want to bring in. So I love to take them on a hike, whether it's 30 minutes or all day. So take a hike on the West Side Trail.
Meghan and Brittany, we are 10 years out from the beginning of this project. This podcast is part of that. What about the future of the West Side? Will there be new trails? Will there be loops? I know some of us have mentioned that. What about nature centers or facilities?
Adam, I'm always looking forward to working on more restoration of natural areas. So important to me and to the park's mission. On the West Side, I think it's really important to have more of a staff presence over there. Right now, our two nature centers, the Earth Discovery Center and Ornithology Center, are so popular for school field trips that we have turned away over 3,000 kids annually just at the EDC alone. I'm hoping to renovate the old building at Eagles Crest to create a park history center. It would be a field trip destination for local school kids, a museum for general park visitors, and become another resource for sharing our stewardship values of the park. One reason Eagle Creek Park became what it is today, such a large natural area, is because the Lilly family owned a great portion of the land and kept it as their private nature reserve. We love to share the stories of the park's history. Our volunteer coordinator, Ann Ciceri, leads park history hikes and also maintains our park history Facebook page if you're unable to make it in person.
And listeners, if you're interested in more about park history, you can listen to my full episode with Ann about the history of the West Side and the park in general.
We definitely know that a loop is a top priority from the trail users that are currently using the trail and also for all the reasons that Karen stated earlier. The Park Foundation takes the priorities from the park manager, Brittany, and so we look forward to finding funding sources for all the things that Brittany is wanting to do, the West Side Trail as well. So that is our role, and we look forward to doing capital campaigns and looking for grants to do all of those great things that Brittany just mentioned.
I want to thank you all for joining me to tell the story of how this beautiful trail was built. As a relative outsider, it's inspiring to me to know how much effort and work went in by so many people to protect and preserve this treasure on Eagle Creek Park's west side. It's never really that obvious to the public how much time and effort huge projects like this take, so thank you all for sharing your stories and for sharing your time. To see full episode transcriptions and to learn more, visit eaglecreekpark.org. Subscribe or follow the podcast in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Audible, or wherever you listen to podcasts, so that new episodes will be delivered to you as soon as they're available.